Okay, there we go. Dr. Susan Coombs, creativity questions. First one, what is creativity?
Creativity is finding a good solution to standing something up so that it doesn't malfunction.
Very true. There we
during
go.
an important time
Like this.
such
Okay.
as this
Hopefully that holds.
interview.
All right.
Is it still rolling?
It's still rolling it. What is
Okay.
creativity to you?
Okay.
Do you consider yourself to be creative? Why or why not?
See, these are very complicated. As Joe Coombs,
There you go.
profound Joe Coombs, will tell you. These are, topics and questions that still can't really be answered. There's a lot of argument about it. So, as far as what is creativity, doing something different, right? To what extreme? Does it matter if it's mildly creative versus drastically creative? That's where you kind of get into those kind of fundamental arguments. But is this really creativity? How do we measure creativity? Is it, can we teach creativity? Those types of things. So I think at its best, creativity is doing something that is different enough from what already exists so that when you come across it or when someone else comes across it, it inspires them to recognize that this is different, and even better, it inspires them to do something different based on that. So it doesn't have to be art, it doesn't have to be technology, it can be anywhere, any of those things and anywhere in between. But something that changes somebody as a result of having come into contact, whether literal or figuratively, with the thing that's different. That kind of answer.
That's good. That's
Okay.
really good.
It's nice and ambiguous. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is no definitive answer for
Right.
what is creativity. So, do you consider yourself to be creative, though?
I consider myself to be sporadically creative. Maybe non-functionally creative. Like, oh, what about this? And oh, what about this? So lots of really, and as I teach, there can be a lot of creative ideas. Like, that's a good idea, but is it feasible? And that's when we start getting into the academic side of it, or the very practical side of it. It's like, well, that's really great, but can you actually do that? And so as teachers, especially if you're trying to instruct somebody in a creativity course or in entrepreneurship, you want people to come up with the big ideas.
Yeah.
Right? But at what point do you have to start saying, okay, now we put the brakes on it, and if we actually want this to happen, what do we need to do? And that's where you can potentially cultivate more creativity. It's like, what do we need to do? Well, you can't do that. What do you need to do with that? How is there a creative solution for that and for that and for that in order to be able to accomplish this? Or is it dumbing down or inhibiting the creativity? It's like, well, you can't do that. Well, I guess if we can't do that and we can't come up with another alternative way of doing it, we can't run with it.
That's good. So, along those lines, as a professor and a teacher, how do you think creativity plays into that? Do you utilize that on a daily basis to inspire students, or to try to teach them to come up with ideas for yourself?
Torture them.
Torture them?
The students. Hopefully to inspire.
I know that firsthand.
Yeah, hopefully. You're welcome. Hopefully to facilitate the ability for students to use their own creativity. And I think, as we've talked about before, I think sometimes it's a matter of, it comes very naturally to a few gifted creative individuals, especially as we get older. We've talked about that before. We kind of get out of the habit of being creative because we're being taught certain protocols and certain processes. And this is how you think, this is how you need to approach. And don't color outside those lines because you're not going to get the good score if you color outside of the lines. But at the same time, we need to teach students it's okay to be creative, but also think about the practical areas of it, how are we going to implement this creativity. But when we do get, like in an entrepreneurship course, be brilliant, be creative, but you can't do that, right? It's going to be too hard for you to do. What kind of resources do you have? You want to make sure that doesn't stop students from trying and from being inspired. I think one of the funnest things you can do is maybe ask students, think of the most stupidly ambitious idea, something you've always wanted to see happen or always wanted to do, or the hugest problem in the world. And if you could do anything, if you had God-given abilities, what could you do? And then see what they come up with, and then slowly parcel it down into something that's a little more feasible for them and realistic for them. But once again, it's, as students will tell you, it's really hard to come up with something creative. It's just like, yeah, but that's why entrepreneurship and innovation is hard to do. Creativity, if you just let yourself go, that's, once you get used to it, that's the easy part, because that should be the fun part. The more prohibitive thing is how do we do that since we thought of it, or can we even take a little piece of that and go forward with it?
So would you say, I mean, as teaching entrepreneurship and knowing about it, I mean, creativity, would you say obviously plays a big role in being an entrepreneur and going through all that process?
And the approach that I take, and that a lot of other entrepreneurship instructors take, it's more than just starting up a small business. Like, anybody can start up a small business. Anybody can start up a business that directly imitates or closely mimics another successful business. Yeah. But when we're looking at entrepreneurship, we're looking at doing things different, ideally doing things differently in a innovative, and that's a relative term, just like creativity is, but in an innovative way that somehow gives something to people that hasn't been given to them before, or does it in a better way, and also allows you as an organization to have some type of advantage, even if it's temporary, but a significant enough value to the market, right, that they will choose you above and beyond the substitutes that are out there. Whether it's based on differentiation, a combination of differentiation and price, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But that, for me, is the cool part of at least how my approach to entrepreneurship. It's not just about a small business. Small business is great, but it's so hyper competitive nowadays that if you're not finding a different way that's of significant enough value to the people you're trying to get your product or process or service to, you're going to go under fairly quickly. Right? So why not do something creative versus run of the mill? Run of the mill's boring.
Yeah. Think outside the box and meet those needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Social entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So would you think that creativity is learned, you could teach it, or it's innate that you're born with it? I mean, you said that some people have it.
Yeah, I think some people naturally have it, and I think all of us have that one friend who's like constantly thinking, what about this and what about that? It's just like, shut up. At some point, you're like, stop. But it's still cool how they can come up with these ideas. So I think for some people, it's very innate. I think for everybody, when they're born, it's innate. Mm-hmm. And it gets beaten out of you over time, unfortunately.
Can you teach it back? Can it be taught?
I definitely think it can be taught. I think we can recognize the creativity within ourselves. We can cultivate it. We can build on it. But as with any skill, and I think creativity is a skill, with any skill, it's a matter of how much work you're willing to put into it. Because a lot of people will take entrepreneurship, a lot of people will take creativity, and they'll be like, well, I'm not any more entrepreneurial after having taken that class. Well, actually, how much effort did you put into it? Right? Because a lot of people will sit back, just as with anything, an accounting class, they'll do the bare minimum to get by, and that's not developing any type of skill. But that being said, you can also put in all the effort in the world, but you might not be as creative as that person who's just naturally astoundingly creative. Yeah. But you're still putting yourself on a good path towards creativity, right?
I would say like Sarah. Sarah's very creative.
Yeah, Sarah's very creative. A lot of people, there are a lot of people who are creative, and also a lot of people give up. There's that what we try, or at least what I try to teach in all my classes, is like, while you're thinking of the creative idea, think of the positives and the negatives, the drawbacks, what's wrong with this. But at the same time, if it's a good idea, don't give up on it, right? Find ways around those obstacles. And that's part of creativity as well.
That's good advice. Okay, so...
Brilliant advice.
Well, that's coming up. That's your advice.
Okay.
What do you think influence or impacts someone to be creative? Basically, where does the creativity come from? And you kind of spoke a little bit about it, but there's a lot of external factors out there. What do you think plays a role in someone being creative?
Right. Beyond the innate drive of some individuals to just be creative, I think. Well, it depends. It depends on the person. Like, some people, you need to be forced to be creative. Like,
You pointing to me?
Yeah, a project that's due. Be creative. And for some people work very, very well under that type of pressure. If you didn't put them under that pressure, they wouldn't be creative. But some people kind of need the time to percolate, right, and kind of work things through and filter through things and take in a lot of information and then get that aha inspired moment. But as we know, for most people, the aha inspired moment doesn't happen, or when it does happen, it's not very significant. So working through that process of trying to come up with more ideas and more ideas and more ideas. And why doesn't this work? Okay, put that aside because it's not going to work. But then continually generating more and more and more ideas. So you cultivate that skill. I think that's very important. I think one of the things that inhibits, at least with me, creativity is if I get interference from lots of other obligations.
That makes sense.
Not that I don't love teaching classes, but teaching classes. Like I start thinking about something and then, I have to like prep for this class and go teach. At the same time, teaching those classes is a source of inspiration as well. When somebody kind of mentions something, it's like, oh yeah, what about this? So, depending on how well you're listening and processing, that can be a great trigger for creativity. But just, I think day-to-day obligations, things that you have to do, so meetings. We have meetings and more meetings and more meetings. I'm not talking about student meetings. I'm talking about faculty meetings and all of it. Not that faculty meetings aren't great. They're wonderful, but they're super fun. But things that just interfere with your ability to kind of let your mind wander a little bit. And then with the time that it sometimes takes to actually focus and really generate that good idea, to kind of work it out and mold it into something that's understandable. Obligations, I would say.
So you talk about like your career obligations. What do you think about like people around you, your peers, society, your personal experiences? How would that impact you?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Do you have like maybe an example of something in your life that you thought was a very creative moment, someone inspired you, that something you went through, or maybe someone in your family to be creative?
Well, my dad,
society in general.
I don't know if my dad was creative. My dad was more like your serial entrepreneur. This is something I really like doing, so I'm going to somehow shove it into my life and make a little money off of it, right? So when he would fly bi-wing planes in as a stunt pilot in air shows, that's because he loved to fly and he loves to have an adrenaline rush. So all of a sudden he's doing these things, and then of course he has competition. He's doing this, comparable things, not exactly the same things in air shows. So how do I